Welcome to the second edition of the 2-on-1 Fast Break for Philly Fast Break. I'm Sean Kennedy, joined once again by our NFL handicapper, Dan Erda. In Week 1, he went 2-1 in his NFL picks, alongside a pretty drastic loss in his college moneyline parlay. But we'll discuss all that. Dan, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. I was very clear that the college moneyline parlay was just for fun. I'm 2-1 in my mind.
All right, fair enough. You are the NFL handicapper, so we'll keep you strictly to your NFL record. That's a fair way to go about it, I'd say. So we'll start off with the game that you lost last week in the NFL, which was your team of destiny, Cleveland Browns. What happened there?
What happened there? I have no idea. What happened is Cleveland is bad, and everyone just thought they were going to be... all those teams got new coaches, and people kind of just assumed that they were all going to be better. You saw Philadelphia look better. You saw even Buffalo looked pretty good under Doug Marrone, and it did not work in Cleveland, at least not for Week 1. Now, maybe Miami is just pretty good. Maybe Cleveland's that bad. Maybe Brandon Weeden's not going to take that step forward, I think. Maybe they're missing Josh Gordon. I don't know. It was a bad pick. I was very confident in it, and it did not win. It happens.
They started off pretty well. They were leading going into the half. It was a 7-6 ball game. One strange statistic was that they only gave the ball to Trent Richardson 13 times, whereas Brandon Weeden attempted 53 pass attempts. You would think they would know where their bread is buttered and give the ball to the more talented skill player in Trent Richardson rather than relying on a inconsistent at best quarterback in Weeden so much.
Well, yeah, I must have gotten my NFL offseason news mixed up. I thought Andy Reid signed with the Chiefs. Yeah, I didn't think he was in Cleveland.
Pass happy Andy Reid. He was doing work in Kansas City.
There's another great coaching change that worked out.
Which will transition nicely into one of your other picks from Week 1, which was the Kansas City Chiefs minus 3.5 over Jacksonville, in Jacksonville. And not only did they cover, they put a shellacking on them, 28-2.
Yeah, I mean, they looked great. It was against Jacksonville, so of course it has to be taken with a grain of salt. And I got to give myself a little pat on the back for that one, because that was just one of those games where I said to myself, if this game were being played Week 9, that line's going to be KC minus 7 or higher. So I took the line that I thought was low, and even though it was kind of a public play, because everybody likes to fade Jacksonville, it hit with ease. I didn't even have to sweat once the entire game.
Yeah, that was certainly the biggest blowout, I believe, or one of them, maybe alongside Denver and Baltimore. But a lot of close games Week 1, but that was not one of them. A little fun fact, that was the first time in NFL history that a game finished 28-2, and there's only 14 other teams that have ever finished a game with 2 points. So, illustrious company that Jacksonville can keep in their Week 1 performance with that 2-point point total on the board there.
If it weren't for a garbage time touchdown, Pittsburgh would have finished with 2 points as well.
That's true. Very strange Week 1. A lot of safeties.
Yeah, but like 5 minutes into the season, there were 3 safeties.
Yeah, it was certainly an odd week. A lot of close games, not some things that we expected. One thing you did expect was a moneyline parlay to hit, which was between New England, Indianapolis, and... I'm sorry, it wasn't a moneyline parlay. It was a 3-team 10-point teaser, which brought New England and Indianapolis basically down to a money line, and then Arizona was at plus 14.5, which that did cover for you. So that was your second win of Week 1.
Yeah, it covered, but sure wasn't easy. New England and Indy both almost blew those games. New England actually needed... I would have won a very, very, very large parlay if that game went over, which it would have if they had scored a touchdown on that last drive. But overall, that was a putrid performance. I'm very interested to see how they respond tonight. Indy, there's a million question marks there. I'm not going to touch Indy for a long time. You heard all those reports about all the advanced statistics said that last year that team was not supposed to be good at all. They were like a 6-10 team that just happened to be 11-5. And then they come in at home against the team that's supposed to be the worst in the NFL, and they won the game, but that was not pretty.
No, I believe Bill Barnwell tweeted this out, but he said, and Indy squeaks out a close win over a terrible opponent. It's just like 2012. And he was right. It's just what they built their house of cards on last season, not really playing well, poor defense, but Andrew Luck coming through with some late-game heroics, which more power to him. He seems like he's doing it more often than not, but that's not the foundation you want to build your team upon, to let seemingly inferior teams hang around and then go ahead at the very last second like that.
Yeah, and I don't think Vegas believes in them either, because the line came out for this week, and they're only 3-point favorites at home against Miami. And we saw what Miami did in Cleveland last week. But, I mean, if the Colts are this young team that can play really well at home and have a great quarterback, they should be more than 3-point favorites at home against the Dolphins. So I think they're kind of telling you something there. But I think both of those teams are so inconsistent, I'm not touching that game.
Yeah, certainly not a vote of confidence from the Vegas bookmakers. But the Miami Dolphins do have that amazing front seven, as we saw in the Cleveland game. Cameron Lake led the way, get a few sacks, and they just tore apart a pretty good offensive line for Cleveland. So Indianapolis's O-line is certainly going to be put to the test this week, and that'll play a big factor in what transpires in that one. So moving on, that recaps what you did last week for the people at home, that you went 2-1 in your NFL picks. We're going to
take that every week. 2-1 every week would be a great year.
It absolutely would be. The people want you to go undefeated, but that's just not a realistic goal. They say the mark for a good bettor is to exceed 58 to around 60% of your picks correct. That way you are making a profit while accounting for the vig that goes into each of your wagers. So 2-1 would obviously be around 66, 67%.
Which is not going to be sustainable.
Not sustainable, but got off to a good start with week one. Hopefully people didn't listen to the podcast and take that college pick. But
no, I want to give another college pick this week, and this is the point of the college picks. If you're like me, you like having some money on the games that you watch, just put a couple bucks on them and see if it wins. But it's not like a full unit. It's not a bet that if you lose, you should even be upset about it. To me, I just like to make a college parlay, so I'm entertained throughout the entire day on Saturday, and maybe win some money, and if not, whatever, it was worth it to make the games more fun.
All right, so strong words of confidence in his week 2 pick, which will be forthcoming in college ranks. So moving on to your week 2 NFL picks. First one you've selected is the Buffalo Bills, a 3-point underdog. You're taking them at home against Carolina. What did you see week 1 that's leading you to believe that's the way you want to lean?
We saw what Buffalo did in New England, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that New England looked very shaky, but I was impressed. I was impressed by E.J. Manuel. I was impressed by the whole offense. They looked like they were in sync. I was not impressed at all by Carolina. And overall, how many times are we going to hear about Steve Smith and all the running backs and Cam Newton? They're never good. Carolina never seems to be a good team, despite the fact that they have somewhat talented players. And they go on the road to face a young Bills team. I actually think that E.J. Manuel reminds me a lot like a young Cam Newton. And I think this is a very good spot for the Bills to pull out their first win of the year.
I did like the Bills' performance in week 1. They fought New England tough. Very easily could have came ahead with a victory in that one. As far as Carolina goes, they played a Seattle team that is the pundits' favorite to go on and win the Super Bowl this season in a lot of circles, and they were right there with them all game, only losing by less than a touchdown at home.
They didn't cover the spread, though.
They didn't cover the spread, that's true. I do notice that they've gone back to trying to pigeonhole Cam Newton into being more of a pocket passer, and it seemed like towards the end of last season they were really playing their best football when they were letting him get out in that spread offense, do some zone read actions, and it seems like they're getting away from that in week 1. There was a lot of rumbling in the offseason that they want him to be more of a traditional passer, and I just don't think that's his game. So whether or not they go back to that at any point in the season, that'll be something to watch. But in week 1, they didn't, and it didn't look like what they were trying out there was working, as they only put up 7 points, albeit against a very tough Seattle defense. So, Bills +3 at home.
I almost went bold and took the money line, and I do like the win. I do like them to win the game. But I could see Carolina eking out a 17-16 kind of win here.
Yeah, both defenses looked strong in the opener. The Bills obviously holding the Patriots to in the low 20s, and Carolina led by Luke Kuechly, who is one of the premier young linebackers in the league, holding Russell Wilson and company to only 12 points. So could be a low-scoring defensive battle, and it's always good to have those 3 points on your side when you're making a wager. So moving on to your next pick, you liked a total. This will be the first total we've had for the people at home in the 2013 season. The Green Bay Packers-Washington Redskins game, you liked over 49.5. What did you see in week 1 that's leading you to go with that?
What I saw in week 1 from the Redskins is they're talking about how much RG3 struggled, but you got to remember he didn't play at all in the preseason, not at all. and he looked really bad in the first half. But once he got going a little bit, when the second half started, yes, the Eagles are playing prevent D, but his throws are much more crisp. The offense looked good. I like their offense in general. They have a lot of wide receiving weapons. Everyone from Hankerson to Garcon, to even their first stringer, Aldrick Robinson, is a weapon. I think they have a very good offense, and the Pack showed that the Pack gave up over 200 receiving yards to Anquan Boldin. And I'm not trying to insult Anquan Boldin, but he shouldn't be getting 200 yards catching in a game.
Yeah, actually, his first time getting 200 yards since his
first game ever
of his career. So, second time it's ever happened, and it's been around a decade since it happened. So, you're right about that. That's not something that's going to happen too often.
I don't know. The Packers quarterback, I forget his name. He's pretty good, though, right?
Yeah, I think he's in some commercials on television.
Brett
Rogers.
The Packers are going to score. They're going to score on anyone. I think that we have a couple more weeks left, maybe, of totals being under 50. I think we all see the way that the league is going. A lot of passing, a lot of touchdowns, even garbage time touchdowns, sending games over the total. You got two very competent quarterbacks here, two very competent offenses. Neither one of these defenses is anything great. And I think one of these teams could very easily score 30, 35 points, and the other one's obviously also good for 3 touchdowns. So I'm a little suspicious as to why the total is so low, but I'm going to take it.
A lot of similarities between the Packers' first 2 opponents. You had the 49ers in Week 1. They just kind of sold out to stop the zone read action of Colin Kaepernick, and he ended up torching them for over 400 yards passing. So it'll be interesting to see if they sell out in a similar fashion to what the Redskins try to do, or if they back off and let Robert Griffin III try to beat them with his legs and really test him, which would be the first time he's been tested to try to run the ball since his major knee injury.
Although I'm a little worried how slow the Packers' offense is going to look in comparison to the Eagles' offense.
Yeah, not something you say a whole lot about that fast-paced attack at Green Bay, but after that Chip Kelly blur offense that we saw in Week 1, and we'll discuss a little later, everybody looks a little slow by comparison. But over 49.5 is your second bet for this week, and I feel like most people at home would agree that these teams certainly have the capability to put up those type of points.
Having said that, I'll probably be 21-10, but we'll see.
That's the NFL. You never really know.
Never know.
Third wager of the week, you had Detroit minus 1.5 at Arizona. Cardinals coming off a tough loss on the road against the Rams, now playing at home, and Detroit with a very good, albeit at times sloppy, Week 1 effort in a home win against the Vikings.
I hate being on the square side of plays, and this is definitely the square side. I see a lot of really smart football minds taking the Cardinals here, while if you look at the public percentages, they're all on the Lions. But I think the public's right here. I still don't think the Lions are getting enough credit. I was watching the preseason, that game against the Patriots, when they absolutely dominated them. And you said they were sloppy last week. They really were, but that game was more of a blowout than it looked. You saw Peterson's first touchdown run on the first play of the game. After that, he scored 2 more touchdowns, but he didn't get many yards on the ground at all. Detroit really got much better on defense. They have a very good front 7, and that offense is something special. I think Reggie Bush fits great in that offense. Matthew Stafford is having what I think is going to be a bounce-back year after a kind of shaky 2012 season. And I think this team is legit. I think this team is going to be a playoff team. And I don't hate the Cardinals. They're much better. Carson Palmer is obviously better than anyone they had last year. But I think the Detroit Lions are the better team here, and I don't think it's that close.
Yeah, you brought up Peterson's rushing totals. I believe he only had something like 17 yards on his subsequent 15 carries after that big 70-some yard touchdown romp on his first carry of the game. So the Detroit front 7 is certainly a formidable unit. They're led by, obviously, Ndamukong Suh, and they got Nick Fairley, also a young defensive tackle. But one thing I don't like about them is they always seem to commit dumb fouls, and it's year after year, game after game, and it seems to come down through the organizational level where Jim Schwartz instills in them this tough guy attitude, and they don't play smart. in a lot of situations, it seems like.
That's very smart, and it's very true. And Sue is the key person there. That guy takes more dumb penalties than anybody in the game, possibly.
Yeah, coming off that low block on an interception return that not only cost them a touchdown, although I believe they ended up scoring later on that drive, but also cost him $100,000 out of his own wallet. So I don't think that that's something that's going to stop him at this point from doing those kind of bonehead plays that he's become known for, unfortunately, for Detroit. But I did like their Week 1 performance overall in Minnesota. They had a few touchdowns that even got wiped off the board. They had a Calvin Johnson one that the Calvin Johnson rule came into effect, where he didn't come down with full control of the ball.
Which is the dumbest thing in the world. If you're a running back, all you have to do is reach the ball over, and the second the ball crosses the plane, automatically play over, it's a touchdown. And apparently, a wide receiver has to catch the ball and then run around for 5 minutes before it counts as a touchdown, because that's ridiculous.
It really is. I think maybe they have to dunk it over the goalpost for count for 6 points.
If the goalpost rejects you, then it's no touchdown.
Yeah, there's some interesting rules in the NFL, and that's definitely one of them. Running back can fly over the pile, and if the tip of the football crosses the very front plane of the goal line while it's in the air, that's a touchdown. So, just one of those interesting rules that the NFL has instilled and make things a little more frustrating for those Calvin Johnson fantasy owners out there. So, you do like Detroit, -1.5. Any thought there of just going with the money line rather than the -1.5, or do you feel confident enough in a 1-point Detroit victory not being an outcome there?
I mean, if it happens, it happens. I am okay with the 1.5 points without paying the extra juice. The one thing I thought about was taking the over this game, because they have a great front seven, but they are going to give up some points, especially I think it's going to be a back and forth shootout kind of game. But all in all, I think Carson Palmer is going to throw some interceptions in this week, and I think that the Lions are going to win the game if it's by a field goal or more.
Okay, I can certainly see that happening, and definitely two teams that are going to be passing as the Cardinals struggle rushing, and they're going to look to take advantage of that weak Detroit secondary.
The one thing I always say about it is, you're exactly right. Both these teams pass. I mean, no one on Arizona is going to run. Every time, incomplete passes stop the clock, which always leaves more time for scores. And I definitely take that into consideration when taking an over/under. So I would lean for that over, but I'm not quite going to bet it.
All right. Well, moving on to your fourth and final NFL pick of the week. We had a money line parlay, and this is a money line parlay, correct, on a teaser?
Yes, this is a money line parlay.
All right, we had the Cincinnati Bengals at home against the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Atlanta Falcons also at home against the St. Louis Rams, and the Houston Texans at home against the Tennessee Titans. Two of those teams coming off losses, albeit on the road, in the Falcons and the Bengals, while the Houston Texans were a last-minute comeback against the San Diego Chargers during the late game of Monday Night Football after a controversial roughing the snapper penalty, which not many people out there knew about.
I had no idea that was a penalty.
No, I don't think the Chargers knew about it either. And if the team in the NFL doesn't know about it, it's probably tough for most people at home to know about it. Although Donovan McNabb.
I was just going to make a Donovan McNabb joke.
Yeah, he might put that argument to rest since he thought NFL games couldn't end in ties. But, so 3-team moneyline parlay, Bengals, Falcons, Texans. What are your thoughts?
You guys saw Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh couldn't score against Tennessee. I think Pittsburgh's bad. I don't think they're having a rough year. I don't think they're going to be down to mediocre. I think they're bad. They have very little weapons on offense. Their offensive line is tragic. Roethlisberger either has to hurry his throw or he's on his ass within 2 seconds. I think that team's bad, and they're going against a division rival on the road who is a playoff caliber team, which I need to make the playoffs for one of my futures bets. But they know that they lost their first game. They probably should have won it. They were leading for some of that game, but they need this game. If a team starts 0-2 that expects to be in the playoffs, then things get a little fishy. And they're playing a team that, despite the fact that they did not look good, they're not going to be taken lightly by a division rival. I think Bengals win that game. Same thing with the Falcons. They lost the game they could have won on the road week 1. The Falcons almost went to the Super Bowl last year. They don't want to start 0-2. They come home. Rams are not a terrible team. That's why I don't want to lay the 7 with this. But I do think the Falcons at home take this. And as much as I praise the Titans for the way they played last week, they're on the road in Houston. Houston's a very good team at home opener. I don't think it should be too hard for them. I like this one a lot.
All right, well, let's go right to that Houston-Tennessee matchup. In Houston, the Bulls on Parade section is going to be raucous, rooting on J.J. Watt and company. So, what did you see from Houston in Week 1 that gives you confidence, other than just that stout defensive unit? Because it looked like the offense was a little out of sync to begin with that timeshare at the running back position between Tate and Foster.
Yeah, I am actually a little bit worried about Arian Foster. I'm not so sure Arian Foster is the best running back on that team right now. He's obviously had a great career, but you got a lot of people make this comparison. I'm far from the first person, but he looks like that 1 year Larry Johnson just broke down and wasn't any good anymore because he just got used so much in the previous years. And Foster, I hope he proves me wrong. I hope he comes out and completely dominates, but his time could be done. But they do have a great other running back in Ben Tate. They have enough weapons on offense with Andre Johnson, DeAndre Hopkins, I like. Owen Daniels is very good. And they're home. At the Titans, you know what? You got to show me a little bit more than one game before I am going to think you could actually beat a team like the Texans on the road.
Yeah.
They can cover the spread. They might very well cover the 10.5 points that the spread's going. I don't think they win the game.
No, I would agree with that. Houston, one of those teams that people throw around as one of those could possibly sneak into the Super Bowl if they get on a nice little run in the playoffs. Always there around 11-5, 12-4, seemingly every year.
They never win in the playoffs, and people always go right to the quarterback. Got to have an elite quarterback, and Matt Schaub is good enough to get to the playoffs, but has yet to show that he can go any further than that.
That's true, but this is the regular season, so
I'm happy.
Happy with Matt Schaub going against the Titans.
They don't play
this weekend.
They don't play teams like the Titans in the playoffs.
No, not that we can see as far as this year will end up. But moving on to the Atlanta Rams matchup, the Falcons almost pulled it out against the Saints. They had a last-minute drive where the Saints surprisingly made a goal line stand after they opted to go with a field goal to make it a 6-point advantage rather than trying to punch in a 4th and 2 inside in the red zone and maybe go for a touchdown to put the game out of reach. But they trust their defense, and it paid off for them. And Rex Ryan looked pretty. Not Rex Ryan, his brother Rob Ryan. He looked pretty excited there on that New Orleans sidelines after his unit pulled out that goal line stand. So after coming off that, and Julio Jones a little banged up with the knee. Roddy White came out on Twitter and
he's a decoy.
Lashed out at fantasy owners a little bit, saying, "Hey, maybe if I'm not on the practice report, you shouldn't be playing me in the first place." After he got a little backlash for his 2-catch performance in Week 1.
He was strictly a decoy.
Agreed. So, do you see enough left in the Atlanta arsenal to go against a pretty good and underrated Rams defensive unit?
No, if this game were on the road, I would be very iffy about it, and I certainly wouldn't be including it in any money line parlays. I think Julio Jones is fine. I think he's going to play. He'll be all right. Harry Douglas playing at number 2 is not bad at all. He's not phenomenal, but he's fine there. Tony Gonzalez, Steven Jackson, they have enough weapons. I don't think it's going to be a high-scoring game. If I ever leaned an under, which I don't like to look for unders, because try betting an under and watching an NFL football game. It's not fun at all.
No, you can't watch it. You just pretty much have to set it and forget it.
Yeah,
and look at the score 3 hours later.
Nothing like watching the game and when a touchdown scored, you get mad.
Yeah, that's why the Red Zone channel hasn't become one of the most popular sensations in America, because they show defensive stops.
Right. It might not be a blowout here, but I think they get the job done at home. It's kind of like even in the games, the Indianapolis and the New England game last week, where it's like they didn't bring their A game, they looked shaky, but at the end of the day, they were like, you know what, we're the better team here. We'll find a way to get the victory. Because remember, teams don't want to cover a spread. Teams want to win the game. If they cover the spread, that's great for gamblers. But very rarely do you see a team go into a game saying, "Oh, we need to win this game by 6.5 points." They just want to win.
I couldn't agree more. Before the podcast, we just talked about this. One of my strategies, as far as my betting goes, is I like to align myself with teams' interests. So for favorite, I don't necessarily like to take them with giving the points. I'd rather take them in a money line because they don't care how much they win by. They just want to win the game. And we also mentioned when we were discussing earlier baseball games why I hate run lines, because they don't care whether they win by 1 or 2 runs, they just want to win.
And the one thing that really it's my biggest pet peeve in all sports is the prevent defense. But the prevent defense has been leaving backdoor covers open all the time. So that's another thing to think about before you take like a 7, 8, 9 point line.
Yeah, we've seen it all too often where a team's up by 10, 13 points with less than 2 minutes left, and they don't really care about making that defensive stop when the opposing team has the ball that one last time, because chances are they're just going to recover the onside kick and go on for the win. I mean, we saw it last week with the Eagles-Redskins game, and let's talk about that a little bit. Since this is a Philadelphia-based website, and we watched the game together, the Chip Kelly era, off to an exciting start, and what are your thoughts on that?
Sure was exciting. The first half was one of the most fun I've ever had watching football. It's incredible. It's like when you're in a crappy relationship and finally you have the balls to call it off and you get someone new and that person's just so much better than that last person that was making you miserable for the last couple of years. That's what Chip Kelly's like. And it's exciting. It's something new. It's cool that the whole world seems to be interested in the Eagles now. Last year, the whole world was laughing at the Eagles. I do think you can't overreact after week 1. That's one of the keys in betting week 2 is you can't overreact too much after week 1. And I mean, Philadelphia fans are never going to listen to that. They're always going to go crazy. You hear guys on the radio booking Super Bowl tickets right now.
Maybe a little premature.
Yes, but it's great. It's good to know that even if the team does go 7-9, 8-8, they're going to be entertaining. They're going to be fun to watch. I was very unhappy with the second half. I don't like taking the foot off the pedal, and I don't like the prevent defense, and they're both things the Eagles did. But Michael Vick didn't leave the game with an injury. Sean McCoy was great. Everything looked good. It was a great way to start the Chip Kelly era. Just let's see a couple of games before we start getting so excited about it.
Yeah, I like your analogy. It's a little like I agree. It's as though we don't know whether it's going to work out long term, but right now we're getting to go to some hot new clubs and do some other activities that we weren't doing with the old coach, the old girlfriend, as the analogy goes.
Not just missionary anymore.
No, it's not lights off missionary position. So I couldn't be more in agreement. It was a very exciting game. As far as the second half went, it seemed like, and they discussed this in post-game stuff, where the team just hasn't even worked on that kind of slowed down offense. They spent the entire training camp working on that blur offense where they were going fast-paced as possible, and then when they tried to slow things down, I know some of the offensive linemen talked about it, and Vic talked about it a little bit, they just weren't used to it. So when you're up 3 scores like they were in the second half, I thought it was a good time to maybe work on that in a live game situation where there's going to be other situations this year where you need to grind down the clock, and with a 3 touchdown advantage or 26-7, however many they were ahead by multiple scores. That's the time you need to work on it. You don't really need to win the game by 40 points.
And you need to win the game, which they almost did not.
They almost did, and you're right. But I think the line of thinking might have been correct even if the end result wasn't as good. So they needed to, rough out some of those rough edges with their more grinded out offensive attack, in my opinion.
And the one other thing is, let's see this team play 2 full halves against a quarterback who is actually warmed up and has thrown a couple of passes already this season. RG3 looked a lot different in the second half than they did in the first half. I think the team got a little bit lucky that they were facing a rusty quarterback.
Oh, I agree. I don't think the defense has solved any of his issues. I think the defense is still going to be a concern for the team all season long. They don't have a lot of depth, especially in the secondary.
Secondary is terrible.
And I think teams are going to be able to pass on them all season long, and I expect plenty of high-scoring affairs from the Eagles and their opponents.
Well, 2 things. One, Kyren Williams looked good, which was a plus, because in the offseason, all we've seen him do is get into fights with his teammates, get into fights with other teams during scrimmages and run his mouth. He hasn't really shown anything on the field. He didn't look very good. Patrick Chung looks horrible. I think Patrick Chung might be one of those guys that Philly fans are going to end up booing out of town.
Yeah, Kyren Williams didn't show up to off-season voluntary team activities, and then he got in that fight with Riley Cooper, so not a lot of good buzz from his perspective in the off-season. But yeah, he had incredible diving interception. He had a nice sack where he came off the slot and hit RG3 on his blind side, and just looked solid in the passing game. But yeah, Chung, and like I mentioned, Chung looked awful. Not a lot of depth there, but Michael Kendricks.
Michael Kendricks is
a huge bright spot for the team, and he looks like he might be a keeper for us out of Cal.
Do you see there was some, I forget which one, there was some advanced metrics site that said that Michael Kendricks was the worst Eagles defender on Monday night?
How is that possible?
I don't know. I don't know that. I know advanced metrics in baseball, but I don't really know the football ones that much. But, I mean, that's just one of those things where anyone who watches the game knows that's completely ridiculous.
So, tackles from sideline to sideline and blowing up plays in the backfield is not good for advanced metrics in football?
I don't know, but that's a keeper. That guy was a monster on the field on Monday.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I mean, I'd love to see whatever sort of parameters they're throwing into that formula that would spit out that he didn't play well. So that kind of wraps up our NFL talk. You had 4 picks for the week, which will be posted hopefully Friday on PhillyFastBreak.com. That was the Bills +3 against Carolina, the Green Bay Washington over 49.5, Detroit -1.5 at the Cardinals, and a moneyline parlay for the Bengals, Falcons, and Houston. And before we go, one more college moneyline parlay, your little pet project here.
Little pet project. I like doing it. It's just for fun. Don't put a lot of money on it. Don't bet on it at all if you don't want to. But I don't see Western Kentucky, Maryland, or Arizona State losing. And if you put them together in a moneyline parlay, you get pretty good odds. You get +159. I'm going to do that on Saturday. I want to enjoy watching the games. Hopefully 2 out of my 3 in my moneyline parlay won't lose like they did last week. But take it with a grain of salt, but take a look. I kind of like it.
Yeah, we skipped over that. The Texas Longhorns not only lost to BYU, they gave up 550 yards rushing.
To BYU, a team that has never rushed the ball ever before.
Exactly. And they got the defensive coordinator fired. So,
not a good pick.
Not a great selection in that one. And Cincinnati also lost to Illinois.
Yeah, Cincinnati lost at noon, so I wasn't even paying attention after that.
And Tulsa was your 3rd pick, and they did win, but they didn't cover, not that that mattered.
Right.
Still not a strong, resounding performance from them. So Western Kentucky, Maryland, Arizona State is the week 3 in college.
Yes.
Week 3 in college moneyline parlay. I gotta say I disagree with the Arizona State being thrown in there.
That's my favorite one. I like a -5.5. That's one of those games where the crowd's going to be drinking all day long. They're going to come out there. Everyone's going to be going absolutely insane. I think that's a 10-point win.
I think that could happen. It is. They're at home against Wisconsin. Wisconsin coming from the Central Time Zone. It's a 10:30 Eastern game. Going to be 9:30 on their kind of internal clocks. So certainly late, as you mentioned, the crowd will be going crazy. Not a good environment to come into, but Wisconsin's a pretty good team, and I would say if you liked Arizona State, I'd be more inclined to just take them with the points rather than throwing them into some big money line parlay, because I just think Wisconsin has the ability to throw a wrench in those plans. But
that's fine. I'm not the college capper.
It's the college.
I am as public square as anybody else when it comes to college.
Win pick of the week. We'll see how that goes this time. But your 4 picks we mentioned for the NFL, we'll see how those go. You're 2-1 in the NFL. Hopefully those good times keep rolling. And that will do it for the 2nd edition of the 2-on-1 Fast Break. Thanks for coming on, Dan.
No problem. See you guys next week.